Welcome to our continuing series, Interviews with Aurovilians. And this is number 10
Whoa.
with B again with us. It's such an honor to have him.
I'm so happy to be here. Yes.
I knew Vincenzo from the first days, and he and I would travel to Chennai to get parts and all kinds of things. And he would eat at any dirty roadside cafe. And he said, well, I have a particular philosophy. I said, well, what is that, Vincenzo? He said, I'll eat and I'll get sick and then I won't get sick anymore.
Oh.
And so he could eat any place and never get sick after that.
Wow.
But he was a unique pioneer.
Yes, for sure. And
You remember him?
oh, very well,
huh?
very well. Well, because in these last year, he came back to Auroville, and of course his daughter Oro Taranti. I remember her in the very first days of Portus, there with her mother Claire, and Taranti would always be sitting on the counter. Just this little girl sitting on this cute little girl with her blonde curls. And we would be getting our veggies, and she was always making comments and entertaining everybody. It was so wonderful. And then,
Is this the Claire that
Portus Claire,
uh,
American Claire.
took care of the birds?
No,
No.
You're thinking of
Dietra.
yes, exactly.
This is another Claire.
That's another Claire.
Okay.
We can talk about Dietra also, but this Claire. This Claire is still in Auroville. She is, but an unfortunate thing, we talked about the visas. Her partner now, Richard, had some visa trouble, and then it got even worse, and I don't know if they lost his papers and this and that. He could not get back into Auroville. So they have a house now, as I understand, in Thailand. So he's living in Thailand, she is living here. And so they, he can't come to India, so she goes to Thailand. And Claire has some other very interesting projects to try to help Auroville through the internet and all that. But at that time she was doing the Portus. But Vincenzo, in the early years, when Mother wanted to start Auroville, she sent him out to Promes to build some things. And he was a mechanic and a builder. But then when the inauguration came, she wanted somebody to make that urn. And so she drew a sketch on a paper, that urn, that lotus bud shape. Mm-hmm. She just made a sketch, and she told him how big. And so she called him and she said, you make this. But then he was protesting. He said to the mother, no, Mother, I'm a mechanic, but I'm not an artist. I can't do that. And she said, but you're an Italian. All Italians are artists. And you start tomorrow. Because it was the first week of February, and he only had 3 weeks to make that thing. So he got to the end of it, and he had to stay up all night, because he all those little marble chips. If you've seen that urn, it's got these
yes.
So he had to put them all in by hand. So he's working all night, last 3 nights working. And he was there in Coco Garden in Pondi, and he's smoking like anything and drinking coffee, to stay awake and to be charged up. And then all those ashramites, they sent messages to the mother saying, this man is smoking, this man is drinking coffee in the ashram premise. The mother wrote back a big note. And this is what I heard. I don't know if it's, you don't know what really happened, but this is what they said. Mother wrote back a big note in big letters, please leave that man alone. He has important work to do. Something like that. So then, there was the urn. So then Vincenzo went back to France because he wanted to get more tools and things to build Auroville. And so he came back with another caravan. He did a couple of those, 2 or 3 caravans, bringing all those people, those early pioneers, many of them, Christine, and all those people came with him. Then he wanted to go back, and he talked to the mother. He said, I have to go back again. I have to get more stuff, and we're going to build a city. We don't have enough. We don't have enough. So he goes back again, and then he got some ideas that he could do, I don't know, some projects or something and make a lot of money. And then he would make that money, and then we use that money to build Oroville. So he worked on those for many years, and none of those projects really worked out. So, but then he wanted to come back to Oroville. Now this is just a few years ago, so maybe, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. 6 or 8, he wanted to come back to Oroville, so he sends in, he contact, I'm, returning Orovillian, and I want to come. He said, no, you've been out longer than you lived here.
Yes.
You can't be a returning Orovillian.
I got the same message.
So the poor fellow, it broke his heart. Talk about being an Orovillian, he made the urn, and he built the first building so Oroville could start. So, it shattered him. But still he came because his daughter was here. And his daughter, and he had grandchildren now. He has, I think, 1 or 2 grandchildren. So he came back again, and he went again, personally to them. And he got the same answer. And then he said, I'm leaving Oroville, I'm not coming back here. I can't take this, it's too much. So he goes. Then some of his friends say, this is ridiculous, Vincenzo. You're part of Oroville, you want to be here. You can't let a few people who don't understand the situation stop you. So they went to the entry service. And they, prevailed on the entry service and said, these letters and things you wrote to him is all incorrect. And they put a lot of pressure on the entry service. The entry service then wrote a letter and said, Vincenzo, you're welcome. Please come back. You can join Oroville. So he did. So he came back, but he was here a very short time when he had a little accident with his moped, and he had this scrape on his leg, and this leg got infected. So that infection started getting really bad, turning septic. So and then he was here in the clinic or in the Oroville Health Center, and they said, no, this is serious. This can kill you. And so they said, you got to go to Chennai, to Apollo or one of the big hospitals there, and they have to operate and do this stuff. So, but he was getting really bad, so they got an ambulance. They had to take him in an ambulance. So they put him in the ambulance. They start going to Chennai. The ambulance runs out of gas. So he's lying in the ambulance. They go back to Vincenzo and they say, look, we're sorry, there's a big delay, we'll have to go get petrol and all this. And Vincenzo started laughing. He said, you're on the way to the hospital to die, and the ambulance runs out of gas. And he was laughing. So, but still nobody, thought it was quite that critical. So a couple of people were with him. So they got the petrol, they were a day late or something. They got there with the ambulance, and then they got him into his room. And he was settling into his room, and he was resting, and the 2 people there said, we'll go out and get some food, we'll go get some food and bring back, and so we'll step out for a little bit. So they went out to get the food. They came back. He was dead. Yeah, he was dead. Just in that few minutes, that sepsis got him. So that Vincenzo.
Dynamic man.
Yeah.
Dynamic worker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had those wonderful things.
Remember him well.
Yeah. So many of these pioneers. Many of them went to heaven very, very quickly. What to say? Barbara had a similar story. Barbara Rood's wife, Barbara,
yes.
mother of Akash.
Oh, yes.
She was so wonderful, totally dedicated to Matra Mandir. Spent years in that office, knew almost every donor by name and by heart, and people came to see her. She wrote personal messages to thousands of people. Yeah. She spent her whole day there. She worked like anything. And then she got sick also. She had this kind of, it was this sort of intestinal cancer sort of thing. And then it got bad, and she went to the hospital. So they were supposed to, I think they were going to do a little operation or something. So she was there in intensive care. And John was going there to see her. But then she got a little worse, and she needed the oxygen. So they had her in the oxygen tent, and she needed it to breathe, the oxygen. So then what happened? They had a power failure in the hospital, and the oxygen went off. And they have, of course, they gotta have, for the emergency, they have a backup,
Sure.
you know. But there was some time getting the generator going, like 5 minutes or something. And in that 5 minutes, without the oxygen, she died. And John was there. And John said, "Oh, just like Barbara, take that chance to go out when she could, because she didn't like her situation, you know.
Yeah.
She was a worker.
Yes.
She didn't want to be, you know, being taken care of, and all of that. And
There's another lady who passed away, Dee.
yeah,
You remember Dee?
of course, Bhavana.
Bhavana.
Yeah,
Bhavana
and
Dee.
she changed her name. Yeah, D to Q.
Yeah.
D to Q.
And she did a lot for the Tamil people.
She did for Village Action, and
Yes.
you know, and Ambu and Morris, the two social workers that are still running the Village Action. She recruited them, you know, a young couple, and now they're, you know, grown up in years and doing a fantastic job. She did great work. We started Verite, you know, in the early '80s, and then when the Verite experiment. Did I mention how the Verite experiment went down? We had a wonderful thing there. We talked about Cyril starting it,
Yes,
and
we
giving
did.
it the name, and then after a certain point, you know, our whole co-op kind of failed there. But then Bhavana came in a second wave, and she was there, and Aurelio was there, and they brought it to another level. And then Danya, who was one of the original founders with us, he came back, and now it's in a third phase. But she was there, and she got this throat cancer. And so she tried many things, and it got to the point where she couldn't, you know, really breathe well. So we were looking after her, and she wanted to be at home. She didn't want to go to the hospital. And so I remember just, it was the day before, yeah, it was on a Friday. I was her caretaker, and we had some very good discussions because she and I had some differences on a couple of things, and it was good we could resolve them very nicely, because, you know, you don't want to die with any of these things left. So we resolved them very nicely, and then I was supposed to come back and take care of her on Monday. But on Sunday, she passed away. And yeah, and Anandi, I think, was there with her.
Well, we've talked about some things that are not macabre at all, but they're honoring original pioneers. So now I'd like to turn the conversation to the young people in whom you see such light and such promise. If you can tell us about a few of the very young people.
Well, very young. I mean, I'm living next door to a little family, and they have two very beautiful children. One little boy, he's just 4 now, Uday, and I can see the potential in this little boy. You know, at 4 years old, I mean, you can just see his skills. You know, he can ride on his little cycle full speed, you know, around bushes and everything. I mean, just physically, you know, he's superior being, and so smart and so attentive. And then he has a very beautiful sister, Ayana, who I was very fortunate to be with since she was about 3 years old, because I was a caretaker there with her parents. And so her parents were often busy, and she would come to me, and we had a lot of fun together, you know. She wanted to make a tree house, and her father was an architect, so she instructed him how to make that tree house, even though he was an architect. And then we would have a breakfast up there, and then she would designate, oh, the fridge would go here, and she would take a couple of leaves, and she would stick them on the branch and say, okay, you know, that's where the fridge is. and over here we have the table. She would do all this, all this in her mind,
And how old was she then?
Well, I started at 3,
Ah.
and all the way up until she was about 7 or 8. We were doing all this. Now she's 12, so now she's already what you would call teenage, in a way, and so she's in another world. So the world of childhood is gone. But we had so much fun, and we would do these. We used to travel around the world. So I would take her hand and her foot, and then I would swing her around. This was the airplane flight. And then we would go to Rome, and then we would go to San Francisco, and then we would touch down. And then she would say, okay, now we go to the hotel. I will call the taxi. And then she had her imaginary phone. She would call the taxi. And then, okay, we get back on the flight. Okay, when she's swinging around, she would say, now you know that the stewardess will come. I think I'll have orange juice this time, Coming out of this little one, It was so amazing. So these kind of children you can see, and she goes to this TLC, they call it, this learning center, and they have an open kind of free progress system.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's doing art and doing plays, and they travel. They go to different places in India and do these experiments. So I mean, these kids they're going to be phenomenal, and I know 1 or 2 here and there, but I mean there's a whole bunch of them, and I hear about my partner Nandini. She teaches in transition school in the 3rd grade, and she tells me about these different children, what they do,
yes.
and how incredibly smart they are, and the things they say. It's another kind of. These are the new children. They talk about all those kind of things now about the new race and the special children, but they're there.
Yes.
And
I heard one the other night about a boy that I know, and he was in school and behaving very badly. And so his teacher said to him, I'm going to call your father. And he said, call him. And he said, well, I don't have his number. No, he said, well, what's his number? What's his number? And he said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, let me see your phone. This is a 5-year-old child telling an adult that, let me see your phone to be sure you've got his number on there.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And another little one, she was 3.5, and we were having lunch with her and her family, and she gets down from her chair and she said, I've got to pee, don't eat my dahi. 3.5.
Yeah. No,
It's amazing.
No, there are hundreds of those. It happens all the time. I just, when you said that, I thought I had to think of Shalev, who is the daughter of Aviram and Yorit. And Shalev, when she was, I think she couldn't have been more than 4, maybe she was 5. She told me, and this a couple of years ago, she told me, you have to have WhatsApp. She said, WhatsApp is the latest, and then we can talk, and I'm going to Africa and things, and then you can talk to me. And I said, well, yeah, I don't have WhatsApp, I don't know. Well, show me your phone. And she says, you just download it, and she's working on the phone. You get into WhatsApp, and then I'll send you a message, and you have my phone. So she introduced me to WhatsApp, and I've been using WhatsApp ever since. And this girl, I don't want to exaggerate, but I don't think she was more than 5 at that time.
Whoa.
And now she's about 10. So this was 5 years ago, or maybe she was 6 then. But now she's 10, and now she's a gymnast, and she can do these double flips and all these things, and she's on YouTube doing these flips, and she's just a phenomenal child, And her sister, Osher, who was this little kid, that at Sadhana Forest on Fridays you can go out there. they have a eco film club. They show a film, and they give you a dinner and a little tour of the place. Anybody can go, you know, you don't have to pay or anything. And so this little girl, this is a few years ago, and they still do it, but she used to come, you know, with the bus, the van, and she would be there at the Solar Kitchen. She would organize the people, you know, and she would be on her phone with the place. Okay, we've got so many people today, you know, talking to the kitchen, you know, okay, we'll probably need this much food, you know, just organize the whole trip.
Oh my God.
And then she went to last school, and now she's, you know, now she's an adult. I mean, it's unbelievable, you know, these kind of kids. You just you just marvel. You just marvel when you see them.
Yeah.
You just marvel.
Maybe you could just talk for a few minutes about the media in Oroville, News and Notes and Oroville Today.
Sure. We started Oroville Today with Alan and Carl and Roger. That was a great moment. That was 30 years ago. It was 30 years ago, 1988. 30 years, in 1988 we started that, and everybody said, oh, you know, this you don't have a chance, that thing won't work, you know. If you get out 6 issues, you know, that will be something, but it's going to fail. Alan, I mean, I just had lunch with him today, never missed in 30 years. They never missed it. I mean, 1 or 2 times in 1 or 2 years they put out a double issue because, you know, something happened, there was the cyclone or something. But I mean, incredible. And the high quality of that. Or I worked there for 10 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 10 years I helped them. You know, I was one of the editors, and we had such a good time. And it was such an enriching experience because once a week we would get together for a full morning or a full afternoon, and we had to discuss all the issues in Oroville. We had to discuss all the articles. We had to agree, come to a consensus. Can we write this about the economy? Can we write this about the working committee? You know, all these delicate things. And we would, of course, get into many discussions and conflicts over, no, we can't. Oh, yes, we can. We have to say that. That's the truth. You know, this went on. But it was so delightful. And then Bindu came along later, and she joined, and we had such a good group, and we always met in people's houses. I was working also at CSR at that time, so we met in CSR, and then we met at people's houses, and eventually we started meeting mostly in Karel's house, because he had that big house, you know, in Samasti, and he had a nice patio there, so we normally we did it there. So that went on for all those years until they got their office in the Surrender Tower. You know, in the community of Surrender, they built this tower as a water tank. But then they thought they would put some, you know, instead of just the pillars, they'd put some offices and rooms in. Well, nobody wanted to live in this tower. Nobody wanted an office in this tower. So Oroville Today took it. They took the office up there in this tower. So we called it the Surrender Tower. But that was after 10 years of kind of doing hand to mouth. So then that's when I left to do something. And then they're still there. So they're still in the tower, and they meet there regularly. And so Karel and Alan are still there doing it. And Alan's partner, Anne-Marie, she did the first typesetting, you know, the layouts and stuff. She learned a special program just to do it. And yeah, that was so enriching for me to, you know, to be there and to be able to discuss all the things that were happening in Oroville at that time, and to write these articles. And I remember writing about Krishna's farm, you know, when he started Solitude. I was there just the day before yesterday was his birthday. So I was there in the evening, full moon, there's Krishna with his wife and 2 kids, you know. And I remember him standing there, you know, kind of this kind of wide-eyed, young, very young person. He said, we're going to make a farm here, you know. And you're looking out there and there's nothing but rocks and a few thorns. You know, and you go down there now, I mean, it's a thriving farm, you know, with coconuts and mango, full-grown mango trees and all that. I was just thinking about that the other night. So, I wrote that, I remember writing that article, and, writing down, he was telling me his dreams and all that. And there it's there. So to be part of it in that sense,
Yes.
you got such a nice thing to go around and interview people and to go around and check on what was happening and then come back and discuss with this very bright group,
Yeah.
And then we always kidded Alan, because Alan was kind of the main editor, that he influenced all the policies in Oroville because he used to write the articles about it. See, who had the collective memory of what was happening in Oroville and what happened through Alan? And so he would write an article, let's say about governance in Oroville, right? One of these long articles. Well, all the people in those committees and all the people organizing Oroville and the foundation and donors and the whole world would read this.
They would read it.
They would read it, and whose view are they getting? They're getting the synthetic mind of Alan, who was putting it all together. So we he was like, I always felt he really, and he had such a positive and very grounded view of things, and very fair. And so all those years, in 30 years, no letters to the editor, hardly ever. Because, they put controversial things out. They put things out about what was happening. But, they were truth, and, you couldn't dispute it. And it was very good. Very good, Oroville Today. And then the other, of course, News and Notes, we started, there was, who was involved in that is our old friend Savitra, from the early years, Alan Littman.
Yes, Littman.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he was always really into that, publishing those mimeograph sheets, Because first it was called the Notes, I think just Notes, but we had the Gazette Aurevillienne, came out of Pondicherry. That was the very first thing, and it was written in French and English. So some people wrote on that, like Ron Jorgensen. You remember
yes.
Ron, who was a Tai Chi teacher?
Yeah.
He wrote some wonderful things about Oroville. And I quoted them, I remember quoting them in my book, The Dawning of Oroville. I put them in my book because they were so well written. He had the Landing of Oroville, part 1, and then part 2. They were all in the Gazette. And so then we had our own notes, of course, when he had the heavy times, and all the, that Sri Aurobindo Society era. So the notes got quite intensive, and then the French did this Oroville Review, because that Oroville Review, they wanted something a little more high quality and more of that. And it wasn't just in French, it also had English, French and English, and even some writers like David Wickenden. David Wickenden wrote a lot for Oroville Review because he was a very skillful writer.
Good writer.
So he wrote a lot of articles for them. And the review is still going, but now it just comes out in French, I think, and rarely. I mean, it's not like...
So Oroville Today is the journal.
Oroville Today is really the journal. It really... and then of course you saw the evolution of the quality of it. Now they have nice paper and color photos. And you had people contributing all through the years, some really good photographers, John Mendine and Sven. Sven, they're still doing photos. I think John is still doing photos. So those guys kind of supplied it. But now, see, everybody has their cell phone and they have good resolution cameras. So now they, the reporter takes their own photos, and Alan and Carl, they just, so they're not relying so much on the so-called professional photographers, but the quality of it is really good.
Well,
we're fortunate to have that.
When we meet next, I would love if you could bring your book and we could talk a bit about your book.
Oh, happy to, of course.
Wonderful.
I will do that.
Wonderful.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you.